May 13, 1944. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, Pearl Harbor. The hum of the teletypes echoed through the dimly lit room as Lieutenant Commander Robert Williamson sipped his coffee, staring at the message coming through the coded transmission. His eyes flicked to the chart of the Pacific on the wall, where dots marked the known positions of the enemy. The message from the Japanese submarine I-16 was clear. A scheduled rice delivery to the southern coast of Bougainville was imminent. This seemingly mundane message would soon trigger one of the most devastating anti-submarine hunts in naval history. The Pacific War had reached a crucial point. Japan's 7th Submarine Squadron had been patrolling the waters from Truk Island to the Admiralty Islands, guarding the lifeline for Japanese supply lines. If American forces could sever this supply chain, it would cripple Japan's ability to maintain its garrisons across the Pacific. The American Navy knew this, and they were ready. The USS England, a Buckley-class destroyer escort, cut through the Pacific swells. Aboard her, Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton and his crew knew their mission: intercept and destroy the Japanese submarines that had been wreaking havoc on American forces for years. What they didn't know was that this would be no ordinary hunt. As Williamson set down his cup and reached for the phone, he knew this could be the break they needed, but none of them could anticipate just how effective America's new weapon, the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar, would be in the coming days. As the message came through, the sense of urgency grew. USS England, with its 186 men and specially equipped arsenal, was at the ready. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton stood on the bridge, observing the tactical plot. The enemy submarines were skilled, evasive, and capable of devastating strikes. However, the American Navy had a critical edge, a weapon designed to turn the tide. The Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar was about to be tested in combat. The Hedgehog was a weapon born from British engineering, a series of 24 barrels that launched 65-pound projectiles designed to explode only upon contact with a solid object. Unlike traditional depth charges, which required perfect timing and depth predictions, the Hedgehog's projectiles spread over a large area, improving the odds of a hit. Its effectiveness was a game-changer. With a success rate of 1 out of every 5 attacks, compared to the traditional method's 1 out of every 80, the Hedgehog promised a higher likelihood of destroying enemy submarines. Meanwhile, on the I-16, Lieutenant Commander Teiuchi Yoshitaka and his crew of 94 men were preparing for another routine mission. The rice they carried was vital for maintaining Japanese garrisons scattered across the Pacific. They had already survived attacks by aircraft, depth charges, and near misses with Allied submarines, but they knew the dangers of operating near American destroyer escorts. Yoshitaka also understood that they had a critical vulnerability, the need to surface to recharge batteries. That vulnerability would soon be exploited. The American destroyers USS George, USS Raby, and USS England formed a tight search formation, sweeping the ocean for their quarry. The sonar operators on board were experienced, their ears finely tuned to detect the subtle differences between ocean currents, schools of fish, and the distinct sound of a submarine hull. They had learned from past encounters, and now their task was to locate the enemy before it could escape. On May 19, 1944, the first breakthrough came. Sonar First Class David Chun had been tracking contacts for 18 months, but this time, the unmistakable signature of a submarine rang through his headphones. His heart raced as he dialed the coordinates and alerted the crew. The I-16 had been found. At 13:35 on May 19, 1944, the sonar report echoed throughout the bridge of the USS England. The unmistakable metallic sound of a submarine had been detected, and the crew quickly went into action. Lieutenant Commander Williamson immediately plotted the course and depth, mentally calculating the most likely position of the enemy submarine. The hunt was on. The Japanese submarine, I-16, had detected the American sonar pings and immediately executed an emergency dive. The crew aboard the I-16, well-versed in evasion tactics, began to implement their countermeasures. They knew how to use the thermal layers of the ocean to mask their movements, exploiting every trick they had learned in years of underwater warfare. But the American crew, armed with the Hedgehog, had one advantage: mathematics. Williamson, educated in trigonometry and physics, had carefully studied the geometry of underwater warfare, and he was ready to apply his knowledge. The first attack came at 13:41. 24 Hedgehog projectiles soared through the air, striking the water with precision. But the I-16 had gone deeper than expected, and the projectiles missed. Williamson adjusted his calculations and ordered the crew to prepare for another attack. As the seconds ticked away, the tension on the USS England rose. Each attack was a race against time. The enemy submarine was maneuvering desperately to escape, but Williamson's crew was relentless. Sonar operators remained glued to their equipment, tracking the I-16's every move. They were the unseen heroes of the hunt, listening intently, guiding the crew through the fog of war. The second attack came at 13:58. This time, 3 projectiles hit their target, followed by a muffled explosion that reverberated through the water. The I-16 had been damaged, but not destroyed. Williamson could hear the grinding of damaged machinery over the sonar, but the submarine remained maneuverable. For the men aboard the USS England, the hunt had become personal. The stakes were high. Each attack meant the difference between success and failure, and each strike required absolute precision. As the battle raged, it became clear. The Hedgehog was the weapon that could change the course of the war, but it would take all the American ingenuity and courage to use it effectively. At 14:10, the third attack was launched. Williamson's calculations showed the I-16 was at 325 feet, but the Hedgehog projectiles passed harmlessly overhead. The enemy submarine had successfully evaded another strike, and the crew of the USS England was growing more frustrated. However, Williamson did not give up. He ordered the crew to refine their calculations, adjusting for every variable, every evasion tactic the I-16 might employ. The fourth attack came, but once again, the Japanese submarine proved its cunning, evading the strike at the last moment. Japanese submarine crews were masters of evasion, and they had honed their skills in the Pacific's unforgiving waters. But the Americans, too, were learning, adapting with each new encounter. At 14:33, Williamson made his final calculation, adjusting for every factor, from depth to evasive tactics. This time, the attack would be different. I-16, having evaded for so long, was now out of options. The Hedgehog was ready, and the crew was poised for the final strike. At 14:33, the final attack began. USS England's crew had spent hours refining their tactics, each member focused on their role in the deadly game of cat and mouse. The I-16 was trapped in its own web of evasion. It could no longer dive deeper, conserve battery, or change course without risking the inevitable. The enemy submarine had reached its breaking point, and so had the crew of the USS England. Lieutenant Commander Williamson's calculations were now honed to perfection. He called for 24 Hedgehog projectiles to be launched, each one designed to hit the I-16's vulnerable pressure hull. The projectiles flew through the water with deadly precision, their fuses ticking toward impact. The sound of the explosion was deafening, the shockwave traveling through the hull of the USS England. The I-16 was hit. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the sea erupted as the submarine's hull gave way. Oil slicks and debris began to surface, the grim markers of a ship lost beneath the waves. A single submarine, with its crew of 94 men, had been destroyed in an instant, yet the consequences of that loss rippled through the Pacific. For the crew of the USS England, it was a bittersweet victory. The tension, the stress, the fear, it all culminated in this moment. The Hedgehog Mortar had proven its worth, sinking its first target, but there was no time to rest. The hunt was far from over. The USS England's success did not go unnoticed. In just a few short days, it had destroyed 7 Japanese submarines, the 7th Submarine Squadron decimated in a brutal, relentless sweep. The Hedgehog's deadly efficiency made it clear. No longer could the Japanese rely on their submarines to provide vital intelligence or disrupt American naval operations. But the toll was high, and it wasn't just on the enemy. American destroyer escorts had been engaged in continuous operations for days, exhausting their fuel, ammunition, and morale. USS England, USS George, and USS Raby had pushed their limits, working tirelessly as they hunted down the remaining submarines. The toll on the men was visible, the long hours leaving them weary and drained. As USS England sailed through the waves, the crew could not yet fully comprehend the scale of their victory. They had disrupted the Japanese Navy's strategic planning. The 7th Submarine Squadron, vital for Japan's reconnaissance, had been destroyed in just 12 days. The psychological blow to Japan's submarine forces would take months to recover from. The impact of the USS England's success was not limited to the immediate victory. By the end of May 1944, as the 7th Japanese Submarine Squadron was obliterated, American anti-submarine tactics had been irrevocably transformed. The Hedgehog mortar had proven itself to be an invaluable weapon in naval warfare. It was no longer just about brute force or luck, it was about precision, about making every shot count. The loss of 7 submarines in 12 days demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of American technology and tactics, setting a new standard for anti-submarine warfare. For Japan, the defeat was more than just a military loss, it was a strategic disaster. The submarines had been the lifeline for the Japanese Navy, providing crucial reconnaissance and disrupting American fleet movements. Losing the 7th Submarine Squadron meant Japan had lost its eyes in the Pacific, and the ripple effects would be felt throughout the remaining years of the war. No longer could they track American movements, no longer could they surprise the enemy with stealthy attacks. They were now forced to rely on slower, more vulnerable surface ships and aircraft for intelligence, a change that would drastically reduce their offensive capabilities. The psychological impact on Japan's submarine crews was profound. The men who had once felt invincible beneath the waves now found themselves in a deadly game where they were outmatched, outsmarted, and outgunned. Morale plummeted as reports from captured Japanese documents revealed a growing fear among their crews. Radio intercepts indicated that Japanese commanders were requesting permission to abandon their patrol stations, retreating to safer waters in a desperate bid to avoid the onslaught of American destroyers. It wasn't just the loss of ships, it was the loss of confidence in their ability to succeed. For the USS England, the victory would go down in history as one of the most successful anti-submarine campaigns ever. Yet, despite its remarkable achievements, the crew remained humble, driven by a sense of duty that carried them through each perilous engagement. Lieutenant Commander Williamson, whose mathematical precision in targeting had played a crucial role, would later become a key figure in developing further anti-submarine tactics used in the Pacific. The tactical methods he refined aboard the USS England would become the blueprint for future operations. As the war progressed, the technological gap between the United States and Japan continued to grow. American radar systems, capable of detecting submarines from over 15 miles away, combined with advanced sonar and the deadly Hedgehog, meant that Japan's once feared submarine fleet could no longer operate with the same confidence. Submarine warfare, once a terrifying and unstoppable force, had been turned into a science, a combination of math, technology, and unyielding persistence. The USS England's success was a testament to the power of American industry and innovation, proving that technology, when used effectively, could change the course of war. As the war in the Pacific raged on, the legacy of the England's hunt continued to shape naval strategies. The Hedgehog and American sonar systems became the standard tools of anti-submarine warfare, and Japan's submarine capabilities steadily declined. By the time the war ended, the American Navy's dominance over the seas would be undeniable, and the contributions of ships like the USS England would remain etched in history as a symbol of tactical brilliance, sacrifice, and technological superiority. The USS England's story is not just one of tactical success, but of human endurance and ingenuity. The bravery of the men who faced the relentless pressures of underwater warfare is still remembered today. Their legacy is not only in the sinking of submarines, but in the principles of modern naval warfare that continue to influence military strategies around the world. The loss of the 7th Submarine Squadron marked the turning point in the Pacific War, where Japan, once the aggressor, was now forced to defend. It was the beginning of the end for the Imperial Japanese Navy and the start of a new chapter for the United States, one where victory was no longer just a hope, but an eventual certainty. As the USS England sailed back to port, her crew was exhausted but victorious. They had not only defeated their enemy but had shown the world that superior technology, coupled with unwavering resolve, could shift the balance of war in the Pacific.